Hello, everybody, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. We're officially 2 weeks into the NFL season now, so that's super exciting. It's going to be a fun rest of the season. I think there's a lot of teams that are looking good. There's a couple surprise teams already, I'd say, off the bat. So it's definitely going to be an interesting rest of the season. I'm excited to see what happens with it. I hope everybody else is too. I hope everyone's having a great start to their week as well. Weather has been nice. Hope everyone's enjoying that. So welcome to the show, and I'm pleased to introduce my guest that I have with me today. He does very, very, very good Patriots content for the Providence Journal. Very knowledgeable about football. Mark Daniels, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, Gabby. How are you?
Doing well. Yeah, it's been a fun season so far for football. I'm really happy to have it back. It feels really good that it's everything seems to be back now and just in full force after the weird season that was last year, and so it's definitely exciting. So I love having football back.
Yeah, it's nice to watch a game with the crowd. Last year was weird. I spent say last year covering home games, and then road games we didn't even go to because media access was a bit different. But when you were at the games, it was just quiet, even with the pumped in crowd noise. It was just strange. We had one in stadium practice, and I remember they were pumping in crowd noise to let the players see what it'd be like, and it was so bizarre. It almost felt like you're in a zombie movie, right? And there's like noise outside the stadium. It didn't sound real. So yeah, it's awesome to have the crowd back. It adds a lot to the games for sure.
Yeah, that's so weird to even picture. And the environment and the atmosphere is just so much different without a crowd there. And I feel like even with the players, it just helps with the energy the players bring if they have actual fans in the stands cheering. So it was definitely strange to watch games last year and not be able to hear the actual fans there.
Yeah, I write pretty much during the course of the game and take notes. And sometimes you look down and you hear the crowd roar, so you look up. But like last year was so different. You like look down and almost like forget for a split second, like, oh yeah, there's things happening that I need to watch, and it's quiet. It's great to be back to sort of normal life.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why this season is going to be so much better than last year was for a lot of different reasons. But I'm excited to dive into a lot of this Patriots related stuff with you. But before we get into that, can you just give people a little sense of kind of how you got involved in working in sports and just your path to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I sort of knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a sports writer. I always enjoyed English and writing, and I love sports like your typical, I think, person or sports fan who grows up in New England. And in high school, we had this program. It was essentially a job shadow. So like one day you could go and like hang out with someone doing a job. Now, a lot of people would just say they were, with their parents and like stay home. Like that's a lot of my friends did. My mom, though, she contacted the Boston Herald, and what ended up happening, they let me go with a sports writer. His name was Steve Conroy. He covers the Bruins now, and I went with him to a Red Sox game. And I sat in the press box, and I'm like, man, these guys do this for a living. They're like watching baseball. They're at the game essentially for free. They're getting paid to do it. I'm like, I need to do this. So that was like probably my sophomore year in high school. I started writing for the student paper in high school. And I went to college. I went to the University of New Hampshire. And I got involved pretty early with the student paper down there, and I ended up covering college football, and I loved it. Covering football was so much fun. So I'm pretty old. So my 4 years at UNH were Chip Kelly's last 4 years as the UNH offensive coordinator.
Oh,
So the
wow.
offense was so much fun. UNH, it was like the first time in program history they were number one in the 1AA division. It was awesome, and I left UNH really hyper focused on wanting to do football. Now, I really wanted to do the Patriots. And obviously at the time, I graduated in 07. The Pats were, full swing in their dynasty. I remember being in high school watching, Tom Brady win that first Super Bowl. And I'm like, I want to cover the Pats. And it's hard, right? It's hard to get into this industry. And you think about it, you want to cover the Patriots full time. That's great. But there's like a dozen jobs in the world that people actually do that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, so out of college, I took a job with the Boston Herald, and I actually contacted the editor who let me do the job shadow when I was in high school about it. He didn't remember me, but it got me an interview, and it got me this like entry level position. And my job, it's funny to think back. I edited stats in the sports section. Like you open up the Boston Herald, you'll see like box scores and standings and league leaders. That was me, and I did it to 2 o'clock in the morning as like a 22-year-old, and that was hard because, my friends are enjoying nightlife in Boston. Everyone's over 21. They're out in, wherever. And I'm in an office waiting for like the LA Dodgers West Coast game to get over so I can get the box score in the paper. And I did that really for 4 years. And I started writing more. And at the time, my in, which is really funny, I wrote about MMA and the UFC because people didn't really want to do it. And I did it for the Boston Herald. And off of that, they started sending me to Patriots training camp. And that was in 2011. And that year, I was at some home games, sort of part-time. I worked with Ann Rappaport, of course, with the NFL Network, and Karen Gregian, who's just a legend. And I ended up going to the Super Bowl that year, and that was when the Pats lost to the Giants for the second time. So that sort of kickstarted me writing for the Herald while still editing stats, in the paper part-time. I was doing both. So I'm like working, I want to say 3 years doing that, where I'm like, all right, I'm finally at Gillette Stadium. But then some nights I'm in the office till 2 a.m. And that led me to the Providence Journal. And that was 2014. I was hired to cover the Pats full-time as their Patriots beat writer. Great year to get in it because that's when they won the Super Bowl again. And so think back to it. I've been to 5 Super Bowls. I've been on 3 different duck boats for 3 different parades. I've been to the White House twice for 2 different presidents. It's been incredible. It's been a lot of fun. I think the industry's changed a lot. I think COVID changed a lot. It's different the way we're doing things now and even last year. But I think back to joining the Projo in 2014. I've really had the time of my life. I have a lot of fun stories about just some of the other writers who I'm best friends with, and some of the players, or it's funny to think like what I do for a living now and where I started. Editing stats till 1-2 o'clock in the morning to now. Yeah, I'm writing about the Patriots, and it's pretty great.
Yeah, and that's a cool story because, sometimes you have to just take that job to get your foot in the door, and it might not exactly be the most glamorous job in the industry, but that job can help you get other jobs once you have that experience. So the fact that you were doing it and that was your way in to get to where you are now, where you love what you're doing and you're traveling to all these games, and that's so cool. And so you kind of look back on that probably. And although that might not have been the most fun job in the world, it helped you get to where you are now.
Yeah, I was at the Boston Herald for 7 years. And I mean, Ann Rappaport helped me for that one season, but I mean, I latched on with Jeff Howe and Karen Gregian, and I learned a lot from them, and they were just phenomenal. So I had good mentors there, and I worked really hard. And I think that's one thing too about the industry is that I think a lot of people really want instant gratification, and it's really difficult to say like, all right, I'm going to be a sports writer and my first job will be like a columnist to write about the NFL. It doesn't usually happen that way, and you need to work your way up somewhere. And like for me, like when I was at the Herald, I mean, I honestly wrote about everything. I wrote about the Bruins, Red Sox, Celtics, college basketball, football, MMA, UFC. I did everything and anything they would ask me. I did like a little league story. It didn't matter. At the time I just wanted to write and I wanted to prove myself. And I think it stays true today. Like if you want to do something, you need to do it, but just don't say no. I think that's the thing too. Like just if someone, whatever, a website, newspaper asks someone to do it, just say, yeah, I'll do it. It doesn't matter if it's, field hockey, boys lacrosse, just do it and show them you can do it so you get more opportunities.
Yeah, and having that adaptability of being willing to just write about whatever, no matter what the sport is, it just shows that you're willing to just do different things and just be versatile and just write about whatever they ask you to write about.
Yeah, and I think that, that's part of it too. Like you can sit down and say, all right, I want to write about this sport, but I think it helps to sort of, get a broad sense of how to tell a story, because if you think about it, like your journalist job is to sort of tell you what happened and come up with a creative way to do it. But you can write a story about, any athlete in the world. It doesn't have to be football. There are good stories everywhere. And, it's about finding it, learning how to talk to people. That's a big thing too in my industry, because I'm like right now we're not in the Patriots locker room, and historically we would be about 4 or 5 times a week. And it's about learning how to approach professional athletes, building a relationship, how to ask them questions. I mean, even with Bill Belichick, it's a great example. How do you ask Bill Belichick a question?
How do you? Yeah.
There are people who are really nervous and they don't want to do it. I get it. But like, honestly, jump in, like sit and listen to the way, someone like Mike Reese does it, and like try to find out what works for you and how to word something. Like I'm at a point now, I've been around Bill for so long that I know instantly sort of when I hear a question, what the answer will be. Like sometimes I hear it and I'm almost like, uh-oh, here we go. He's going to rip this guy. Like, you know it, but like, it just, again, it comes with experience. And if you have experience, say interviewing a high school coach, it's going to help you in the long run.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too, is just that experience and just being comfortable and familiar with these people, especially because you're interacting with them all the time. So I feel like you probably just get a sense after a while of, their personalities and the types of answers that they would give to different questions the more that you talk to them, which is cool.
Yeah, and I think you have to find out how to relate to people.
Yeah.
When me and my wife had our first kid, it was funny because all of a sudden I had something like to talk about. Like there's a lot of players in the NFL with like young children, and as a dad with young kids, it gave me a really easily thing to relate to players. Like I used to talk to like Duron Harmon and Chris Hogan about like teething techniques and like naps. Like yeah, it was really funny, but it allowed them to see me that like I was like, hey, we're human beings, we're dads, we can relate on something level, on a different level than just football. And I think that sort of helps you when you're like, hey, I want to talk to you about something. They know me. That helps. It helps, It's like any friendship. People, when they know you, they will open up to you. But it's about how do you get there? How do you get a professional athlete who doesn't want to open up? And sometimes you got to, talk about babies. So that's what I did.
Yeah, I mean, talking about kids, I mean,
Yeah.
who doesn't want to talk about kids? That's a fun topic, and it's lighthearted a lot of the times too,
Yeah.
and it's not football related.
Yeah, for sure. Or like movies, music, and it's I used to try it all. It's different now though. It's with Zoom, it's Zoom interviews, and it's not as relatable. I don't love it. I'll be honest. The past 2 years have been hard. It's not we don't have a great like connection with the athletes right now, and it's difficult because of COVID. It's it could obviously be a lot worse. I think a lot of people lost their job over the last couple of years. So I'm grateful to still be there. But yeah, I can't wait to get back in the locker room and just sort of find out who some of these guys are.
Yeah, and it's tough, and especially with players who are in their first season, and so you haven't even really gotten a chance to interact with them in that same type of way as you have players in the past. You're really only seeing them over video. So when you ask players like Mac Jones a question, who has played 2 real games in a Patriots uniform and doesn't really know you, that's got to be tougher than asking a question of like Bill Belichick, who you've known for a while and have more of a relationship with now.
Yeah, it's hard. I think we've lost out a lot on a lot of that personal stuff. Even last year with like Cam Newton, and he was such a sort of I think in a way a controversial topic. But I tell you what, on Zoom interviews, Cam Newton was awesome to deal with. He's one of the best professional athletes I've ever dealt with, and I always said like it would be awesome to deal with Cam Newton in a locker room. Like, what's he like? What music's he listening to? Like, I bet he'd be cracking jokes. I feel like we missed out on getting to know someone like that who was only here for a year. Yeah, but like Mac Jones, that's a great example. Like last year's rookie class too. I can't say that I know, Patriot rookies like Kyle Duggar and Josh Uche all that well. Whereas like every year it would be the new thing. It's like, all right, here's a rookie class. You want to get to know them all. You almost think of it in the terms of like investing, right? Because you build a good relationship with a young player, and as he gets better, it could certainly pay off a reporter. And an example I have there would be like Malcolm Butler. In 2014 was my first year on the beat full time. He was an undrafted free agent, and he didn't talk. He didn't talk a lot to the media because he didn't play. He didn't play for like really at all, like here and there. I talked with Malcolm every week. We would talk about like Madden and like random stuff, and we had a good relationship. So he makes the interception on Russell Wilson in the Super Bowl. He becomes pretty big. He, gets Pro Bowl next year, all pro that. But then all of a sudden, I could get a one-on-one interview with Malcolm Butler anytime I wanted. And it was because I talked with him and I formed a relationship with him even when he wasn't playing. And I think, again, it's a fun part of the job just to get to know some of these guys and who they are. And I can't wait for that personal connection again.
Yeah, I'm sure. And that just sounds like so rewarding to be able to just be around the players like that and get to know them outside of their sport and off the football field, because there's so much to them, because like you said, they're human beings as well, and they all have their other interests outside of football, and just being able to know what those things are, and you can relate to them more, and it probably just makes you a better interviewer as well.
I think it helps when you know some of these guys too, and I'll be honest, like someone messes up or they play poorly, I need to write about that, right? But like when you know someone, it makes them more human. I used to tell players when I was in the locker room, like you get people and see a lot of these guys, with helmets on, but they didn't really know who's under the helmet. Do you really know the guy? And that's always sort of my goal. And even now, I'm still trying to do that. It's difficult, but last week I talked to a handful of Mac Jones high school teammates. I had some, conversations with his dad, Gordon, about him and sort of like why he is the way he is, which is just a team first guy. And it was really interesting to sort of hear about his background. And I learned a lot about Mac Jones last night writing this feature, for the Providence Journal. It was, in our paper this past Sunday. So I learned a lot. I'm happy I did that. But yeah, it's a little more challenging to get there now.
Yeah, absolutely. COVID just really just put a damper on a lot of things for a lot of people and just makes things a lot more challenging. But hopefully at some point soon, you can actually get back in the locker room so you can just continue to develop those in-person relationships with the players. Because like you said, that's super important.
Yeah, it is. And I think it makes the stories better. And, times are changing, obviously. I think a lot of players now are a lot more vocal with Instagram and Twitter. And, I don't know if they're really on TikTok. I can't say I'm on TikTok all that much.
Some of them are.
Yeah, so like some of them, I feel like we're already seeing their personality, but there's 53 players on their roster. There's like, whatever it is, 14 guys on the practice squad. There's a lot of people down there. And sometimes the best stories aren't always the starters or the stars. And, I always say it's my job to sort of find the good ones. So yeah, it would be great to be able to dive in there again.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and this season is just an interesting one to cover in general, just because just a lot of unknowns going into this season with the team and just changes that they were going through and not having Cam anymore and rolling with the rookie quarterback for the first time in a long, long, long time, because Belichick never had to do that with having Brady for so long. It's just a fun season to be able to cover, I feel like, and there's just a lot going on. But what do you think about Mac Jones so far through the first two games and what you've seen? Because I think he's looked pretty good so far, and I'm really excited overall, as long as he can stay healthy, about his future with this team.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to cover. I think it's made it really fresh. It's a lot of us down in New England, we haven't done this. Rookie quarterback. It's awesome. And through the first two games, I have been impressed. I think he's played well. He's limited his mistakes. I feel like perhaps Josh McDaniels is keeping the training wheels on a little bit. You see that with some of the shorter, intermediate passes they're having him do. But I wrote a column after last night's game or yesterday's game that if you look what every rookie quarterback's doing in the NFL right now, Mac Jones is actually performing the best, which I think is sort of interesting. And I think people need to put it in perspective that playing quarterback in the NFL as a rookie, it's insanely hard. I did a story a few weeks ago looking back on it. They've never had a rookie quarterback win a Super Bowl or like make it to a Super Bowl. A rookie quarterback's never been an MVP. A rookie quarterback's never been a first team All-Pro. And historically, rookie quarterbacks are bad and they play for bad teams. So I think if you sort of remind yourself that, like, hey, the expectation shouldn't be sky high right now. Take it, for what it's worth. Yeah, he's playing solid. They won. He put them in a position to win in week 1 against Miami, but Damian Harris fumbled in the 9-yard line. Like, really, the story of that game should have been like, fourth quarter comeback in his first NFL game. That would have been pretty fitting considering, Tom Brady was here for a while. So I've been impressed with what he's done. I thought he was great in training camp. He really, really impressed a lot of us down there with just the way he throws the ball. He's accurate. He's really smart. And the big thing I hear about him with the players who speak is just like how smart he is. And I think you sort of get a sense when you remind yourself, like, hey, the Pats offensive system under Josh McDaniels is historically hard to learn, but Mac Jones is doing a pretty good job already with it. And we're 2 weeks in and he's going to get better. So yeah, he's not throwing for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, but I think in terms of him, his first 2 starts, he'll take it. I think the future is bright and the Pats should be happy. I'm sure they are happy.
Yeah, I mean, and he definitely seems very just aware when he's on the field of what he should be doing in certain situations. And he's just good at kind of deciding what's best to do in certain situations, which really reminds me a lot of Brady in that perspective. And also with his accuracy too. That's kind of like Brady also. And we need somebody like that because Cam lacked that accuracy aspect as well. And also just wasn't as aware as much of what he should be doing with the football in certain situations. And I think that Mac is already ahead of that in terms of just that awareness and how smart he is, like you said. And you can tell he's working really, really hard to learn this offense and just really learn this Patriots system. And I think that that's a really good feature and really good personality trait for him to have as our quarterback. And this is the guy that they're going to be rolling with for a while now. And so it's good that you have somebody that's that dedicated to really learning this offense quickly. And it seems like he's just picked up on a lot of things already. And that's pretty incredible, seeing as he's only had 2 real NFL starts so far.
Yeah, and it's interesting too to think like back to like the pre-draft process and how people sort of measure like prospects, and a lot of it's like arm strength, combine type numbers, right? So Mac Jones isn't the most athletic. He doesn't have the strong arm. Like, he doesn't have an arm like Zach Wilson. He's not athletic like Trey Lance or Justin Fields, and he certainly wasn't as well put together as Trevor Lawrence. But I think one thing people really sort of did not measure with him was his IQ and his football IQ, because he's really smart with the football. And his decision making is just outstanding. He's not perfect. He's going to make mistakes. It's going to happen for the rest of his career. But I've just been I'd say I've been really impressed with, where he goes with the ball, where he doesn't go with the ball. Even yesterday, I keep saying like last night, yesterday afternoon, he completes 22 or 30 passes. He has 8 incomplete passes. So I went back this morning and looked at him. Out of his 8 incomplete passes, only 2 were inaccurate. So like, he's really accurate, and you're right. It fits Josh McDaniels' system really to a T, and it is reminiscent of what they did with Tom Brady. People, you're not putting him in the Hall of Fame yet. And another thing, like with a comment like what I just said, it'll be interesting to see what happens to him in his career. Like, how good will he be, and what are the expectations? Because realistically, if he plays 10 years in the NFL as a starter and he gets to like 4 Pro Bowls, it's a successful career. There are names you can throw out there that would make people sort of like not be happy. You say like, what if he's like Tony Romo or Andy Dalton, right? Or like, both guys went to multiple Pro Bowls. Both guys went to the playoffs multiple times. Andy Dalton went to, the playoffs with the Bengals. I want to say like 2 to 4 times or something like that. So like,
Yeah.
what will be sort of the measure of success for Mac Jones? In a way, it hurts him coming in a couple years after Tom Brady, but I think the sky's the limit. I think he'll be successful. I don't know if he'll be Aaron Rodgers or Pat Mahomes, but maybe with Bill, you don't need that. Maybe they can win, and I think with Bill Belichick too, a storyline is, can he win a Super Bowl without Tom Brady? And if he gets one, it'll certainly add to his legacy.
Yeah, that's the big thing now is Brady did it without Bill. So now can Bill do it without Brady? Or did he really need Brady to drive all that success? And so it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that all plays out. And if they do win another Super Bowl before Bill retires, which I do think they will, because I don't think the man is ever going to retire, if I'm being honest. But I do think that they will. It just might take time. And Patriots fans, with how much success that we've seen for that 20 plus year span, having Brady as the starter, obviously that puts expectations already high for Mac Jones as it is, because he's coming into a system where people are used to seeing so much success that's a tough place to be in as a rookie. So obviously the expectations from fans are probably going to be higher than they should be right now. But I know some people were losing it after the week 1 loss to the Dolphins. I mean, that was a brutal way to lose that game, because like you said, Mac Jones did set them up to be able to win that game. And had that fumble not happened, the result probably would have been different. And that's just so disappointing as to see them start their season like that. However, what I took out of that game was that there were a lot of mistakes that happened in that game that were fixable, just like with the turnovers and just bad play and sloppy play in certain areas. And that was all stuff that is fixable. So I wasn't even super concerned after they lost that game, even though that they could have and should have won that game. I don't think that there was I wasn't majorly concerned from what I saw from that game overall. And I was even more excited about what I saw from Mac Jones and the offense more so than anything, really, because it seems like he's starting to really be in tune with a lot of his offense, which is super important.
Yeah, and I think this year too, and I think if we're realistic, the Pats probably aren't Super Bowl contenders, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like my prediction for them would be to like get one of the wild card spots and go to the playoffs, and try to win a game, try to get out of the wild card round, and I think that'd be a great sort of stepping stone for them. The key for the Pats will be really their defense, and if they can play lockdown defense, and they allowed 6 points yesterday, and was it 17 points in week 1? You can't complain about that, but I think that'll sort of be like a big storyline. But Mac Jones in the offense is the biggest storyline, because we're not just talking about this year. It's, do you have the franchise quarterback? So like, yeah, even when they come out of a loss, my whole reaction was like, they have the guy. It looks like they have the franchise guy. Be right. He has to stay healthy. He has to improve. You want to see things get better. So as this season goes on, I think for expectations for like Mac Jones and the Pats, like, can they put themselves in playoff contention? and sort of just give themselves a chance. I don't see them, as like winning a Super Bowl with Mac right now, but who knows what'll happen in year, 2 to 4. Like following young quarterbacks is really interesting for me. Like you think back to like Josh Allen in Buffalo, he wasn't very good as a rookie in those first couple of years. I think people are saying like, do the Bills have their guy? But then all of a sudden you look at him now and you're like, yeah, last year he was unbelievable. They went to the AFC title game, and this year he, again, the Bills, people think they're Super Bowl contenders, and it's because Josh Allen developed. Now, conversely, look at like the Jets. You had Mark Sanchez, and you beat the Patriots in the playoffs back in the day, and what happened? He just fizzled out and he didn't develop. So it's like it's interesting. I think it's an exciting time for Mac, but there's like, yeah, the big overall storyline is, can he get better this year, and can he continuously improve? Because when you do, you see what happens. You turn into like a title contender like Buffalo, and when you don't, you turn into the Jets, and that's what no one wants.
Nobody wants to be the Jets. Yeah, I mean, and I will even say, even looking at the game against the Dolphins and comparing it to the game against the Jets, I mean, there were still things that happened in the Jets game that need to be cleaned up. And I was looking at my friend and I said, they're lucky they're playing the Jets right now, because they were making some mistakes that probably would not fly if they were playing a team like Tampa Bay, who they're playing in 2 weeks. So I think that there's definitely still things that they need to clean up. But again, it was only week 2, and that stuff is obviously all going to be addressed. So I'm not overly concerned as of right now. If we were halfway through the season and some of this stuff was still happening, I'd be a little more concerned about it. But you're right. I mean, the defense is going to be a big storyline this year. I do have a lot of confidence in the defense just because they improved from last year. Physically, there were players that came back that weren't there last year. And so that was already a step in the right direction for the defense. And so there's a lot on paper that, they can be excited about this year in terms of the fact that they really could compete. I mean, my prediction for their record for this year was 11-6, which might end up being a little high. But if they can if they can go like 10-7 or 11-6 and get a wild card spot, then I'll consider that a successful season. Seeing and thinking about everything that they've been through over the last really year or so, like over the last season and then the off season this year and into this season, I think I'd consider that a success. But again, I mean, Buffalo's tough. Miami, who knows what's going to happen with Tua? Because I mean, I don't think they know his status yet since he came out of the game, his game too. So I think that's a question mark. And there's other tough teams in the AFC as well. But I do think that this Patriots team definitely has the potential to be a wild card team.
Yeah, and it's an interesting time in the conference too, or even the division, because the Bills have their guy in Josh Allen, and I think with like the Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots, there are still some questions because you have 3 young quarterbacks, and I wasn't overly impressed with Tua, in week 1, and obviously he went down with an injury, which is really unfortunate for them. I think Tua just needs playing time, needs to develop, and then with the Jets, you saw Zach Wilson throw 4 interceptions. So yeah, it's an interesting time, and I think with what the Pats did in free agency, they spent more money in NFL history than any team ever has. So yeah, you should improve from your 7-9 record a year ago, and I agree with you. I think 11 wins is possible. I keep saying, like, honestly, between 10 and 11, I think that would be a good spot. They have a tough schedule. I mean, New Orleans sort of Jekyll and Hyde over these past 2 weeks. It'll be an interesting game depending on which Jameis Winston you get. And then, yeah, Tom Brady comes into town. That's going to be insane. I think it's the most expensive regular season ticket in NFL history. Yeah. You see what he's doing right now, and I'm like, how is anyone going to stop this guy? But then
I know. I feel I'm scared about that game, to be honest.
Yeah, but even like later in the season, Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. Justin Herbert's a good quarterback with the Chargers. I'm not overly worried about like Houston or Carolina. But then, like, Tennessee's a really good team. The Colts, I think they can be good. I think so. I think Carson Wentz is hurt right now. And then you have 2 games with the Bills and, Dolphins on the road. It's a hard schedule. It's so difficult that, frankly, if you get out of it with 10 or 11 wins with a rookie quarterback, you should be thrilled. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm not going to be super bummed if they get to the wild card and then can't do anything from there, because seeing as this is very much going to be an unknown type of season in terms of we didn't know how everything was going to go. And with a rookie quarterback, you don't really know what you're going to get at first anyway. So I would see going to the wild card, considering the strength of schedule this year, to be a success. And I know there's obviously a lot of factors that go into that. I am definitely very concerned about that Tampa game. I think that's going to be the most watched game of the season, but no matter who your team is, because who doesn't want to see Tom Brady's return to Foxborough? But it's also going to be interesting to see what Mac Jones can do in a primetime game also, because that'll be his first big test in a big primetime game like that. So I'd be curious to see how he handles that pressure. But again, he's also played in these types of games before. I mean, winning a national championship at Alabama, so he's played in games like this before, but I am going to be interested in seeing in his first NFL primetime game how he's able to handle that pressure, and if he's able to be composed against the guy who, is the Patriots legend that was their quarterback for so long.
That's such a great matchup for the Patriots for like a variety of reasons too. Like, can the Patriots defense, like, they have a lot of improved players, then they won't have Stephon Gilmore. How will they look against Brady, Gronk, Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin? Like, that's a stacked offense. So we're gonna sort of get like a measuring stick on how good this defense really is. And then you're right, with the Patriots offense, you only score 16 points in week 1. You have 4 turnovers and score 25 points, but I think we probably all left that saying, we would like to see them get in the end zone more. Can you keep up with Tom Brady and the Bucs? I can't wait for that. That's going to be great. Like, and if they do, if Mac Jones and they go out there and put up over 30, that'd be a lot of fun. It would tell us something. But the funny thing about the NFL, and I always have to remind myself of this, is like, people are so reactionary, right? Because we get the one game a week, and that's all we have to talk about for the week, and then we preview the next game. So like, if they go out there and they just they're terrible, I'm sure people will jump to conclusions and overreact, but it's the NFL season is a marathon, right? You need to get there at the end, and whoever's the best team now doesn't mean they'll be the best team, in January, February. Like, people, I keep seeing on Twitter, like, Tom Brady should be, playing in the Super Bowl again. Yeah, it looks like that now, but will they stay healthy? With the team, will they be as good? Will other teams figure them out? We'll see. It's a part of the journey with the NFL season. It's fun.
Yeah, exactly. And even with teams like the Raiders and Broncos being 2-0 right now, that's surprising to me, for one, how that division is looking right now. But again, it's only been 2 weeks of the season. So is that really going to be sustainable? Most likely not. But those two teams have had good starts, and the Raiders especially have been surprising because they've had good wins in their 2 weeks that we've played so far.
I remember, I'm gonna go back in time a little bit. In 2000, like, Pats win the Super Bowl in 2014. 2015, they actually started off 10-0, and they were unbelievable. Yeah. It was honestly one of like the best Patriots teams I've seen, and I'm like, man, how are the Pats going to lose, one, because they're 10-0, and two, they're going to go to another Super Bowl. But then, like, little by little, there were like a ton of injuries that year. It was like both running backs was like LeGarrette Blount, Deion Lewis. They lost, I think, their left tackle, Nate Solder. They had a bunch of injuries on defense. It might have been like Vince Wilfork and Gerard Mayo. And before you knew it, by the time they were in the playoffs, they were like limping. They had no one. Like, I think Tom Brady, there was like a game in, I'm trying to remember who they lost to. It might have been Denver or Baltimore. I think it was Denver. But like, it's just funny to think back to, like, first 10 weeks of the season, the Pats were 10-0. I'm thinking this is going to be like, an epic run, but then the wheels fall off because they couldn't stay healthy. So yeah, it's a good reminder. Yeah, it's like Broncos, the Raiders. That's really fun right now. But can they get there in the end of December and end of January? Well, we'll see. There's a reason why that Twitter site or that Twitter account is like the freezing cold takes.
Oh yeah.
That's why it's really funny, because we're also reactionary with sports, and we could be like, oh yeah, Tom Brady's going to the Super Bowl, and then all of a sudden 5 players get hurt over the next month and they're not as good. So yeah, we'll see.
And yeah, with Tampa Bay, if they stay healthy, I definitely think that they probably would be my pick in the NFC to go to the Super Bowl this year. They're just a stacked team, especially on offense. And I think if they stay healthy, they definitely have a good chance, but you never know what's going to happen. You hope that injuries don't happen, but unfortunately they do. So you just never really know. And it's way too soon to tell that right now. But I do think if the Patriots can stay healthy, they have a shot. I am concerned about Buffalo. I think they're going to have a tough time beating Buffalo. That's just a solid Bills team, and I think they still win the division. Bills. And so I think those are going to be a tough couple of games. Even Dallas is looking good. I mean, they looked really good, especially offensively against the Bucks in week 1. And so the Cowboys, when fully healthy, have a really, really good offense too. So that's not going to be an easy game for the Patriots either when they do play Dallas, if they're fully healthy at that point.
Yeah. I think the NFL is just fun because every week you sort of learn something new, right? Like we come out of week 1 with the Pats, you're like, all right, they had 8 offensive drives and 4 fumbles and 8 penalties. They have to clean it up. And then, after last week, it's like, all right, they came out of New York with a win. We want to see more from the offense in the red zone. And like defensively, they played well, but you want to see more from the run defense. So like you go into the Saints this week and it's like, all right, can the Pats get in the end zone more? Can Mac Jones, throw into the end zone more? Will we see him throw deep? Will the pass protection be better? So yeah, like every week it's a lot of fun to write about and cover too, because it's like every week there's just something else or a different story. Like coming out of this Jets game, like Pat's middle linebacker Juwan Bentley looked great. Is he about to have like a breakout season or be better than last year? Yeah, we'll see. If he can keep it up, he will. But yeah, it's a fun ride.
Yeah, see, that's why it's cool, just because of there's only one, each team only plays once a week, like you said. So much even could change from the time that the game happens to kickoff of the next game too. During that week in between, things could change even in terms of, injuries or just other factors and everything like that. There's always constant updates and constant things happening and constant things that you're seeing in games that you're like, oh, they can improve in this area, or it looks like they got better here. And I feel like for somebody like you probably notice so many different things every game that could be improved that maybe you weren't talking about the week before.
Yeah, and I think honestly, the NFL game, when you see it live, it's like crazy how fast it happens, and it's hard to keep track, instantly when it's happening like that. So what I do every Monday is I go back and I just rewatch it, and I do a lot of pause and rewinding. And they have something called NFL Game Pass, which is great. I'll be honest, it's not as great anymore. I used to be able to go through and pick individual plays, and I can't do that anymore.
Oh, really?
Really tough life I have. I'm planning on rewatching that football.
That was so convenient because you could just skip to whatever you were looking for.
Yeah, but when I go back and I rewatch, I learn a lot. Even today, all right, the pass protection wasn't great. Yasir Durant allowed 3 sacks to right tackle. That wasn't great. But in the secondary, I've been impressed with Jalen Mills over the last 2 weeks. I want to say he's given up just 2 receptions. Obviously, J.C. Jackson's playing well. And yeah, it's fun, especially when it's your job to write about the NFL, to go back and rewatch. Because I think on Sunday, yeah, it's very reactionary on Sunday. You want to tell, who won, who lost, why they won or why they lost, or who excelled. And then the next day, you sort of go back, take a deep breath, and get more nuts and bolts on why it actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, J.C. Jackson was catching more of Zach Wilson's passes in that game than his own offense was. Yeah. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, I see exactly what you mean, because there's things that you can definitely miss when you're watching it for the first time live also, because it's happening so quickly. So when you go and watch the game back the second time, I'm sure there's so many things that you pick up on that you didn't even see the first time, just because of how fast everything happens, and you're constantly trying to take notes and just observe different things. So having that second viewing of it in that second perspective, you probably notice so many things that you didn't see.
And I think the danger of Twitter and being a reporter is that when things happen instantly, what's happening, and I've tried really hard, to not jump to instant conclusions on why something happened, right? You see what you think is a bad pass, and you could say that's a bad pass. Then you go back and watch it, and you're like, oh, there was the pass rush in his face, or something different happened. And I remember last year, Cam Newton was intercepted, and I think I tweeted bad pass by Cam Newton, intercepted. And when I went back and watched it, it actually wasn't his fault. I kind of forget what happened. I think he was trying to hit a running back. The running back actually fell down. So his target wasn't there, because and I didn't notice that instantly when I saw it. I had to go back and watch the tape, and I felt bad. So I'm all right, I need to even yesterday watching the game, something would happen. I wanted to tweet, and I just held off. I actually looked up to the TV to watch the replay. All right, let me take a deep breath. People know what I do for a living. I'm at the game. I don't need to be the first person to tweet, because I don't want to get it wrong. So I think going back and watching it helps, and sort of just taking a deep breath sometimes. I don't have to be oh, what an awful pass by Mac Jones, and you go back and watch it and you're oh no, someone tipped the ball at the line of scrimmage. Or yesterday, it almost looked like Mac got intercepted yesterday. And my first reaction was to be That's a really dangerous pass. But actually what happened was the defense jumped off sides and it was a free play. So we took a shot to the end zone because you could decline the penalty. So like, yeah, he was almost intercepted, but he only threw the ball because there was a flag on the ground. So, it's like sometimes you just have to like wait, wait, take a deep breath. It's hard now though with Twitter. You just want to get it out there.
Yeah, because everybody's sharing their thoughts constantly during games on Twitter and just tweeting about whatever they see and just reacting to that stuff in the moment. And so I feel like it's more difficult to just hang back and not do that and just wait till you have a better sense of what actually happened. Because when you look at something in the moment, it doesn't always end up being, like you said, what it appeared to be the first time. And a lot of people don't realize that because they just tweet their thoughts out during games, whatever they're thinking. And so it's probably hard to not do that, but you just wait and you take in everything, figure out exactly what the situation was, and then you can react to it after that. Once you look at it again and you're like, okay, this is actually what happened. Like, this isn't really on Mac Jones type thing or whatever the situation might be.
And I think like in my industry, the worst thing that can happen is you're wrong, right? Even if it's something small, you sort of feel like, you feel like a jackass. And, I don't want to be wrong about anything. I don't want to be wrong about my analysts or any of that. So I think it's important to sort of just sometimes, take it easy and all that. You go back, watch the tape, and it's funny. That's what players and Bill will say after the game too. Like, I don't know, I gotta watch the tape. It's like
that's a common response to in an interview.
Yeah, especially after a game. Yeah,
because they're like, I have to go back and see what happened.
Yeah, go back and sort of see it. And
yeah, because even with the players, I mean, they're in the game, so they're not thinking about every single thing that happened in that moment because they have to just keep playing. So then after the game is over, when they're thinking about how the game played out, they have to go back and watch themselves to be like, okay, we could have done this better, or we shouldn't have done this here. They don't have time to really reflect on that at the time in the game.
Yeah. It's funny. They have in the NFL, I think a lot of pro sports, what they call a cool down period. So like, I don't think players talk. It might be like 15, 20 minutes until after to sort of let them, especially if they lost, like decompress. And it's funny, you think about it like, oh, do they need it? They're pro athletes, they should be used to whatever happens. We had a media flag football game once, and we were going against, I want to say the Saints beat writers or the Saints media. Okay. We got our butts kicked, and it wasn't really close. And I remember walking back into sort of the media room, and Jeff Howe goes, I understand it now. I understand why there's a cool down period, because if I had to give an interview right now, I'd be pissed. And I'm like, funny way to look at it. Yeah, you need that time just to sort of take a deep breath and collect your thoughts. So
that's so funny. Yeah, that's really funny. But yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, it's definitely a tough industry to be in, but it also must be so rewarding just being able to cover the games all the time and be around the team and just be really observing everything that's going on and basically living that action of, oh yeah, I'm really seeing what they're doing to fix certain areas and they're approaching this differently than they did last week. And I feel like you pick up on so many of that type of stuff in the position that you're in.
I think like for me, I've watched every Patriots game twice now, going back to 2014. So I've watched so much football. You sort of get into like a rhythm and a routine, and I think it just helps. I've done it for so long. But you're right. I'm very grateful that I get to watch football and go to Patriots games. And I've seen a lot of cool cities that I would never go to. Like I don't know if I'd ever go to Wisconsin and Green Bay or like Cleveland or would I ever go to Jacksonville? Probably not. But I've been there and I've been to the stadium. It's cool. Like I've been to Baltimore and I've been around the city. Like I've been to Kansas City a bunch. I would say Kansas City was probably never on my radar, and I love it because the food's amazing. And even like Buffalo, I tell you, like Buffalo, New York I love the trip because the fans are crazy. The atmosphere is nuts. People jump through tables, but like the chicken wings are actually really good. You get it. Buffalo wings. I never connected the two until I started covering the Pats. Now I go there. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go have the best like chicken wings of my life. And that's fun. And I wouldn't know that. It's like, yeah, I'm super grateful what I do for a living because I've like made a lot of, cool friends who also cover the Pats. We have a lot in common. And on top of that, like my bad day at work is like being stressed about like a game story or on deadline. And it's like, it's whatever. I'm watching football, so it can't be that bad.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Whatever it is, it probably isn't that bad because at the end of the day, it's writing about football, But what stadium is your favorite one that you've been to? Would you say?
Well, I love Arrowhead Stadium because it's insanely loud. The parking lot also smells like barbecue when you're walking in, which is pretty funny.
Really?
Yeah, the Cowboys Stadium over there in Texas is insane. It's the biggest, I think it might be the biggest jumbotron in the world. It's crazy big. From a
Wow.
historical perspective, being at Lambeau was a lot of fun. I really like that. It's fun because they all have different feels. Like Chicago, you're set in the middle of the city, and obviously we don't get that here because the Pats play in Foxborough. But it's just interesting, like sitting there in the stadium, like, oh wow, you can see like the skyline of all the buildings around, where the Bears play at Soldier Field. It's fun. Yeah. So I don't know if I had a pick. I love the atmosphere at Lambeau. I love the atmosphere at Arrowhead. I loved being at Lambeau, and yeah, the Cowboys is like one of the most expensive stadiums in the world. It's pretty nuts.
I can imagine the environment down there too, with all those Dallas fans down there. I've heard interesting things about just what it's like on football Sundays down there.
Yeah, and I think a non-football related thing too about my job is I try out a lot of local food, which is you probably don't think about it with like sports writers, but like you go to a city for the first time, and I'm always like, all right, what food do I want to try? And it was I used to always ask players, like for example, Danny Amendola was from like the Texas area, and we were going the Cowboys game. I'm like, what should I eat? And he gave me this restaurant recommendation. He goes, try like the shrimp fajitas because they'll be the best thing you've ever had. I'm like, whatever. I did, and they were amazing. I'm like, oh, I'm really glad I did that. Like, yeah. So, yeah, random food story, but
no, that's awesome though. Yeah, that you're able to get those kinds of recommendations of just knowing where to go.
Yeah, even like Philly, one of the players, I forget who it was. It might have been James Devlin, who's from the area. I think he told me to go to this. Like, I'm like, I want to get a cheesesteak, and he's like, go to this place called Jim's, and I did, and it was the best cheesesteak I've ever had. So, hats off.
That sounds really good. But yeah, that's awesome, and what a fun job and such a cool experience, and just being able to cover the Pats week to week. I mean, that's definitely a dream for me. So maybe one day I'll end up in your type of job, but we'll see. But I really excited for the rest of the season. I have definitely have optimism about the Patriots based on what we saw in the first couple of weeks. I think it's going to be exciting the rest of the year. And I appreciate you joining me on the show and talking about your experience and just sharing some things about your thoughts on the team. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And everybody, as always, I always appreciate you tuning into the show. Really always enjoy, talking Boston sports. It's more fulfilling than anything else. So go Patriots is the most important thing about this. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Gabby.